Psychosocial can be defined as the interaction between the internal reality of an individual and the external world, here meaning other people around them. Psychosocial development refers to the development of sociability, psycho-emotional development, and the development of personality. From a philosophical point of view, it is especially interesting that it includes the development of moral thinking. That is because it is an important part of the socialization process. Besides the development of morality, in this video, I will also discuss social capital and inheritance, psychosocial development throughout one's life, development of play, psychosexual development, and the significance of friends and peers, and finally also family. My name is Jouni Vilkka, and this is my channel, TFF, Teacher from Finland. Subscribe and click the thumbs up button. The famous theory about the process of moral development is Lawrence Kohlberg's theory, according to which the development of moral thinking progresses through certain stages. There are 3 levels of this development, with 2 stages on each level. I will simplify the theory here and only discuss the levels or main stages of this development. According to Kohlberg, advancement from one of these to the next happens in discrete steps and always in the same order. The first level is called pre-conventional morality. This is how young children think, and it has little to do with real morality as usually understood in philosophical ethics. It is simply about obeying the authority, the parents, out of fear of punishment. The second level is, unsurprisingly, called conventional morality. The child usually reaches this level around age 12 as they begin to consider what their community considers to be right or wrong. Thus, it is now the larger community, not just the parents, that defines morality. The third and final level is called post-conventional or principled morality, which children should reach during adolescence. They can now think on their own and define their own morality by combining their own interests with those of the community, leading them to commit to the principles they see as important and the right ones to stick to. They are able to consider other points of view and understand the necessity of adjusting the principles to the context, instead of the earlier black and white thinking. Kohlberg actually thought that few people reach this level, and very few under the age of 30. Kohlberg's theory has been criticized by pointing out that a person who is able to use a higher level of thinking in some things will still apply a lower level of thinking in other situations. Gilligan has pointed out that women tend to be raised differently to apply ethics of care, whereas men are raised to achieve things. They are thus raised in very different ways, to think in different ways, and Kohlberg's theory only fits the way men are raised to think. I have previously discussed Kohlberg's theory and this objection in my course Introduction to Ethics. I'll include a link to the relevant video in the description below. When discussing development, it is obvious that genetic inheritance is an important factor, but there is also social inheritance. This is actually related to the inheritance of wealth, but is much more than that. Wealth can be called capital, but there is also social capital. It means the social networks as well as social skills available to a person. The world is so unfair that social capital and economic capital actually are strongly connected because people use social capital to gain the other as well. But for developmental psychology, it is important that social capital can also be inherited by the offspring. The difference to economic capital in this respect is that social inheritance is not only a positive thing for the inheritor. Social inheritance includes the inheritance of social skills and networks to some extent, but it also includes the inheritance of cultural and societal status. It even includes adopting the models of behavior and ability to function in life. All this means that unlike the money you can inherit, which will always add to how much you have, inheriting your parents' social status can mean inheriting their problems and their low status just as well as a high status. It also means, more broadly, that like the Matthew effect, which I explained earlier, states, good things tend to accumulate to some people while bad things tend to accumulate to others. Social problems pile up so that people who have problems with alcohol and/or drug abuse also are likely to have difficulties related to raising their children. Developmental problems and behavioral disorders may be connected to each other, and they may be products of generational social inheritance, among other factors. Meanwhile, those with lots of positive social capital are likely to use it to provide their children with opportunities and benefits others can't dream of. Since the same people tend to have wealth as well, their social connections are likely to be within the wealthy and the business elites. This way, their children get to benefit not just from the wealth they inherit, but also the connections, the social knowledge, the right hobbies and style or taste in material things that help them to make more of the kinds of connections that lead to high-paying jobs and things like that. And of course, they will grow up thinking that they have earned what they got through hard work, not appreciating just how unbelievably lucky and privileged they are. I have an old video about this topic in case you're interested. See the link in the description. One of the most influential developmental psychologists was Erik Erikson, who thought that there are three central dimensions to human life: the biological, the mental, and the social. The highest levels in each of these are reached at different stages of life, not at the same time. There are different developmental tasks that a person must face at those different stages, and how they manage that has a lot of influence on how life continues after that point. These tasks are about conflicts that development requires. Facing them enables the development of new skills or abilities. Erikson presented the tasks through pairs of possible solutions with different outcomes. They are not to be thought of as mutually exclusive and can to some extent be adopted at once. The main point, though, is that if one does not overcome the challenge of a developmental task, it will probably cause problems later on. The following overview of development through life is strongly influenced by Erikson's theory. Psychosocial development begins in the psychological birth, when the infant develops a self-image during their first 3 years. Attachment to the primary caregivers is most important for this, but it is also highly important that during the socialization process, the individual learns to adapt to the social norms, values, and customs of the community they belong to. I just described how moral thinking is related to these developments. This process of socialization continues through one's whole life. In early childhood, one identifies with a parent, usually one of the same gender. Socialization also, normally, helps develop self-control. These are important for later development. During the age of play, it is important for the child to develop emotional skills that enable them to recognize, name, and regulate their own emotions, and to recognize and predict the emotions of other people. The child learns that the same individual, such as a parent, can be the source of positive experiences and emotions, while also being the cause of restrictions and negative emotions. The developmental tasks at this stage are letting go of the pleasure principle, according to which the child merely seeks pleasure and avoids pain, and the formation of the realistic self-image, which I explained previously. As the name of the stage suggests, play is especially important at this stage because it is how the child learns. The influence of the parents is still very important for the child in the development of gender roles, values, and the ideal self, which I also discussed previously. In early childhood, going to school is the most significant new thing in life. It will cause challenges to the child's self-image because prior to this there usually hasn't been much reason for them to compare themselves to other kids. At school this changes, and the earlier exaggerated sense of competence can come crashing down as a result. This can cause feelings of inferiority. Alternatively, it is possible to have experiences of success and competence, which will give a boost to self-confidence. There is a latency stage around ages 9 to 12 when children show little interest in what has traditionally been called the opposite sex. Their friends tend to be of the same gender, and those friends have a lot of influence on how the child dresses and what they are interested in. It is important for them to be able to identify with peers of the same age and to belong to a group. Boys tend to have a larger group of friends than girls. During adolescence, the main task is breaking away from the influence of one's parents. At the same time, one is still dependent on their parents. This conflict typically causes rebellion of some kind. The importance of friends and their opinions is at its height. Identifying with one's peers becomes central, while identifying with one's parents weakens. Peers strongly influence the choice of values, ideals, and role models. Yet there is conflict here as well, because the teenager wants to be both a member of a group and a unique individual. The task is to balance these needs. Emotions at this stage are frequently very intense. The main task for adults has to do with intimate relationships, parenthood, running one's own, possibly shared household, job or career, and finding social groups to fit in. These require thinking about one's own values, for which I recommend practicing a bit of philosophy, especially ethics. I have a whole course on ethics and another on philosophy and critical thinking more generally on my channel. This stage in life will involve growing as a person, adjusting one's personality, searching for oneself in a manner of speaking. It includes making a lot of decisions and a lot of uncertainty, which philosophy teaches you to tolerate. For example, making choices about one's education, commitments to other people, and all the uncertainties about work, starting with finding a job. In middle age, from about age 45 to about 60 years, one has to accept aging and start to let go of things like the strength of youth, opportunities and options, because there will be fewer and fewer of them. One's own children even, who grow up and leave to build their own lives, and so on. It is also an opportunity for freedom, at least compared to the years of raising kids. As one begins to grow old, one's personality can become rigid if one doesn't have enough good mental defense mechanisms. This can be displayed as conservatism and even bigotry. Growing old means different things in different cultures, and the general attitudes toward old people can influence one's self-image growing old. One has to let go of even more things than before, as one's health and competence can become diminished, and loved ones and even acquaintances are becoming fewer and fewer. On the other hand, the so-called third age, when one can still remain active and vibrant before getting old, as traditionally understood, has been getting longer. I'm afraid this trend is going to change as the multiple crises we face, such as the rise of fascism, are likely to turn this around. Those who do experience their third age may in some ways be able to have a new go at life, even forming new intimate relationships. Playing has no external goal. In Aristotelian terms, it is an autotelic activity, done for its own sake. You could say it is the purpose of life. We do many things for something else, such as working for a living, working out to stay healthy or to look good, political activism to try to save the world, or at least to slow down others who are trying to destroy it, and so on. But when a child starts to play, there is no other goal. It's all about just playing. It is an activity that is often spontaneous and always enjoyable in itself. Playing is good for the child as it improves their hand-eye coordination and even muscles. It helps learn a language and social roles and problem-solving skills, among other things. As children grow, the way they play changes as well. According to Mildred Parton, who observed children play already in the 1930s, there are certain stages in the development of play. Before actually playing in a meaningful sense, very young babies observe their environment and move randomly because they cannot yet even move their bodies intentionally. As soon as they can move intentionally, they begin to also play. At first, and continuing up to almost age 3 on average, children start to play alone, even if others are present. This is called solitary play. In the next stage, 2 to 4 years of age, the child will actively observe others play without participating in it. This is called onlooker play. Soon after this begins parallel play, where the child plays like the other they have been observing, using the same or similar toys, but they are still not playing together. Next, around age 3 or 4, begins associative play, where the children interact, exchange toys with each other and observe each other, but still don't quite play together. They do not participate in the same project, so to speak. Proper cooperative play begins between ages 4 to 6, when the children finally play together, socially, following rules they create themselves, perhaps creating stories during play. It is clear that these stages are connected to cognitive development, as the different stages of play require more and more cognitive abilities, skill in social interaction, and problem solving. There are cultural differences in how development of play occurs. Expectations of sociability, individuality, and consideration vary. Child's play is very educational, as the children learn motor skills while wrestling or running after each other in a game of tag. They learn social, verbal, and cognitive skills when playing out dramas of their own creation, called sociodramatic plays. For example, they can play house or doctor, assigning roles to each other and acting them out according to their understanding of the relevant situation. When playing with an adult or old child, the play can be more sophisticated with the scaffolding provided by the older person. Children learn to consider the emotional states of others in pretty much all interactions with each other, so playing is certainly not without benefits. As children learn the skill of mentalization, the ability to understand and predict other people's thinking, they can also understand how some unpleasant things can make others feel. They can take the perspective of another, which is important for learning moral thinking and behavior. They learn empathy and pro-social or helpful behaviors, and they can practice these through play. For example, they can take up roles and pretend that something bad happens to one and the other can help or try to make them feel better. In the past, it was common for adults to play as well. These days, it seems adults mostly play just video games and board games, but the idea of going outside to play tag with other adults now seems odd. It wasn't in the early modern period. Some young adults may actually still do something like that, but mostly people need a sport to justify playing. It can even be something like throwing a frisbee, but even that needs to have rules and a sense of seriousness about it. Why do you think that is? That's a genuine question. Do you feel embarrassed if seen playing? Do you play in some way, with friends perhaps? How and what do you play? Let me know in the comments below. I would expect most people to know by now the difference between sex and gender, as usually understood. Sex is a biological concept, gender is a social one. Although many people believe sex to be simple and clear-cut, it's actually not, but also not the subject here. Gender refers to a pretty stable identity, understanding of what gender one is. I, for example, am a man, and because I was assigned this gender at birth and have never had any problems with being so assigned, the term cis can be added to my gender designation for clarity, labeling me a cis man. If I had been assigned female at birth, but had afterwards had my gender corrected, instead of cis, I would be a trans man. That is how transgender works, and what the term trans and cis mean. By the way, the reassignment of gender alone does not imply any surgeries or other treatments. Although many transgender people want some treatments at some point to affirm their gender. Although I only mentioned 2 genders, there are more genders than that. There are variations in most things, even biological sex. It is only because now some conservative people find these things to be challenging their worldview that this has become a hot issue. Just as it was for the Nazis, the original ones. If something about this bothers you, I recommend actually getting properly informed about gender issues. Most people who have strong opinions about it are not very well informed, or at least pretend not to be, for whatever reason. Children aged 3 to 5 are usually interested in gender differences and identify with members of their own gender. After this, there is a latency period when sexual development is slow and there is little to no interest in such things. This is followed in pre-puberty by increasing interest in sexuality, which is significantly heightened in puberty. That is when actual sexuality begins, which causes sexual tensions in relationships. In early adulthood, the sexual self-image becomes stronger. There are many cultural norms about sexuality and related things like nudity in most cultures. It should also be common knowledge by now, but I'll still remind you that gender and sexuality are clearly separate things. It is possible to also distinguish between erotic and romantic orientation, although sexual orientation is usually assumed to include both. That is, a heterosexual man is usually both erotically and romantically interested in women, but that does not have to be the case. Homosexuality and bisexuality are pretty commonly known types of sexuality, but asexuality much less so. It means not having sexual interest in anyone. Pansexuality is the opposite, where sexual interest is not limited by the gender of the potential object of interest. It is of course possible to be pansexual in the erotic sense, while being more limited in the romantic sense. This is not meant as an exhaustive list, by the way. There are also other types of sexuality. It is also important to realize that sexuality is about what a person is, not what a person does. Just because a person is sexually interested in certain kinds of people, it does not follow that they act on this interest. Also, an asexual person who, at least usually, is not interested in sexual intercourse may still perform the act. I shouldn't have to point out, but other people cannot change a person's sexual orientation. There are also many different types of relationships, mostly limited by culture. Typically, there are legal limitations and regulations regarding how or if the state recognizes a type of relationship. For the relationship to exist, it does not matter, but for things like social interactions with others and some legal issues, such as paternity and inheritance, it is very important. The law and ethics are two separate things, and activists can try to influence the law to be more in line with ethics. I have made a video about sexual ethics as well, if you're interested. The link is in the description below. Being a member of a sexual or gender minority can be a real cause of stress and other health problems if the society is conservative and hostile to such minorities. Members of such minorities have always existed in all cultures, so it would be nice if mankind would finally progress past such ridiculous and harmful conservatism. Friendship can be the most important network of human relationships. Friendship changes over time and also as people grow older, but it is always emotionally important. In a friendship, people also get to practice psychosocial skills. A network means any kind of collection of people who are connected to each other somehow. The connection can be through a hobby, school, place of residence, or any other thing that brings the people together somehow. A peer group refers to a group that consists of people who are peers in some sense, for example by virtue of the same age or gender, or because they go to the same dojo to practice martial arts. An obvious group of peers are the pupils in the same class. This is not just any network of people, because this is a primary group, a more important set of people whose opinions on things probably carry significant weight with a member of the group. A reference group can be fairly abstract, and strangely, a person does not have to belong to this group, but it's still one that they compare themselves to. They may evaluate themselves or their achievements by referring to the reference group. The weird thing is that the choice of the reference group is pretty much up to the individual and can influence their self-esteem pretty much, and still the people choose reference groups that make them feel like failures. They could choose differently. Since we are, biologically speaking, social animals, it is no wonder we typically seek, or at least wish to have friendships. Having friends and being able to socialize with friends reduces stress. Hanging out with friends increases mutual affection and the psychosocial bond between people. Friendship is a stronger bond than acquaintance, and often stronger than that between members of the extended family. This means that friends are important resources who are likely to help when needed, more than some distant cousin or second cousin. Friends are expected to do this even without asking for anything, because, as they say, that's what friends are for. From a sort of material point of view, then, it makes sense to cultivate friendships. You cannot choose your family, well, not your biological family or legal guardians, but you can choose your friends. Friends are expected to keep secrets, and you are supposed to be able to tell them anything. Revealing your weaknesses to your friends can even deepen the friendship. The same social rules that apply with strangers don't apply between friends, at least not quite the same way. Friendship affects attitudes and thinking regarding the friend, biasing them in favor of friends in a broad manner. For example, people tend to find their friends more attractive on average than people in general, and more attractive than strangers would find them. The motives of friends are always assumed to be pure and good, and so on. Robin Dunbar is an evolutionary psychologist who formulated what is known as Dunbar's number. It is the limit to how many stable relationships a person can have. This number is about 150 for humans. The exact number is probably not very important, but rather that the number is fairly limited and much smaller than the number of so-called friends or other contacts you might have on social media. You can, of course, have real friends in social media as well, although especially now with new AI technology, you would do well to be wary of contacts in social media. But you will probably only have some real friends there as well. The total number of people you maintain stable relationships with could still be even much smaller than 150. You can try and count your close contacts and see what your number is. If you do, please let me know what it is in the comments below. Communication technology has caused a huge change in relationships and connections. While making it possible for us to access unimaginable amounts of information, practically anywhere at any time, it creates a ubiquitous presence online where we are expected to be available all the time, or at least we may feel so. At the same time, the amount of time we spend alone has increased, while the amount of time we spend physically with friends has decreased. We can also be among or even with other people and still feel lonely. The ways in which we express ourselves may have changed or may be changing due to our use of social media. It seems that obnoxious people are taking up far more than their fair share of the virtual space online. And now bots or automated accounts that pretend to be humans are becoming a real nuisance as well. A basic ingredient of friendship is trust. Without it, there cannot be real friendship. Trust includes the expectation of positive and fair treatment. Trust is not only a part of friendship, but also part of social life in general. Different societies have been compared with regard to how much general trust there is in them. It seems to make sense to me that if there is little trust among people in a society and people expect hostility rather than friendliness from people, then it will be more difficult for people to actually make friends. I don't know if that's the case though. Either way, it will affect social interactions for example, among peers. What is important is that this general trust has a lot to do with politics. If the people don't trust the government or political institutions like voting, this will make it easier for fascists and other populists to manipulate the people. Countries where general trust is high, people are also likely to vote and otherwise participate in society, for example by joining organizations, even for hobbies. General trust has been high in Nordic countries for a long time. In fact, much higher than the global average. This may be changing, at least in Finland, due to the current right-wing politics. On a more individual level, trust is usually higher among those with higher education and or high income level than the national average. There is one more interesting thing about friend and peer groups in human development. Children seem to naturally form groups that are segregated by gender. This seems to be the case in all cultures. This segregation occurs already in elementary school, age 5 through 10, and becomes even more clear in middle school, ages 11 through 14. When children have been told about a fictional child and asked to imagine a friend for that character, they almost always imagine the friend to be a member of the same gender. This segregation leads to boys and girls learning different kinds of social skills, as the children in the two groups typically interact with other members of their group differently than members of the other group with theirs. Both groups also favor members of their own group and negatively stereotype members of the other gender group. An intimate relationship that develops into a family is usually considered one of the most important developments in a person's life. It is not only important for the individuals in question, but also their extended families. This can be seen in how weddings have traditionally been important social events for the families of the couple getting married. It has been the union of those whole families, not just of the couple. More recently, individualism has perhaps changed, at least the emphasis in this union toward just the couple, but the earlier families are still important. Marriage was also traditionally about creating a family, in the sense of having children, but now it is not uncommon for couples to think of themselves forming a family even without children. Some may think of their pets much like their children, but even pets are not required. Some couples are intentionally without children, others against their wishes. A good intimate relationship, marriage or otherwise, is beneficial for physical and mental health, especially for men. That said, it is also possible to not have a family, marriage, or an intimate relationship of any kind and still live a long and happy life. The first child changes the dynamics of a couple's relationship more than possible later children, because before the first child, the couple can be much more focused on each other. Family life may revolve around the children very much, and this can cause strain on the relationship between the parents. When the last child finally moves out at some point, this again changes the dynamics very much. The empty nest may even cause depression, and there is an increase in divorces at this point. Of course, many may have been just waiting for the child to leave, so they can finally get divorced. Seeing the relationship as a partnership increases especially in late middle age and in old age. This partnership will also eventually end, at the latest, when a partner dies. This is again a big change in life, and especially at old age, it can be difficult to adjust to the new circumstances. The most important relationships we have are between a parent and their child. The temperaments and personalities of the parent and child don't always fit together well, causing problems for the relationship. For the parent, it is important to be able to handle their own emotions maturely and to be able to consider the child's point of view and level of development. Parenthood doesn't end when a child grows up. In a way, it doesn't even end when the parent dies, because their memory will still remain and continue to influence the child, even when the latter is an adult as well. Of course, the role of a parent changes as the child grows, because at first it is crucial to simply keep the baby alive, while later it may be more about providing emotional or financial support. By their example, parents provide the child models of behavior, especially social interaction. The parents should guide their child with consistent rules and limits for the child. They need also to be able to allow the child to take more responsibility as they grow older, especially when they become teenagers. Being a safe adult is probably the most important thing when the child rebels against the authority of the parents and their values and attitudes. They can also help the young person avoid mistakes. At some point, the roles may become reversed as the parents begin to need help and their child, now fully grown, can take the role of the caregiver. They might have to organize care for their parents, handle their finances, and even physically care for them. Diana Baumrind started doing research on parenting styles in the 1960s to see how they would influence the psychosocial development of children. This was inspired by attachment theories, according to which interaction with the parents influences the development of the personality of the young child. Parenting styles were analyzed and several categories were formed. Later researchers have added further distinctions to them. One thing that has been found is that people seem to adopt their parenting style for a large part already from their own childhood, making it difficult to change it. The differences between parenting styles can be analyzed by how controlling they are and how emotionally warm they are. If there is neither, the result is neglect, where the parent doesn't seem to care much about their child. If there is a lot of control but no warmth, the child might obey but not be very happy. This relationship would probably be very adult-centered. The opposite, warm, child-centered relationship, but without restrictions on the child, would be too permissive. It might lead the child to be unable to control their own behavior. The best, then, would be a warm but properly controlling relationship, based on real authority, not authoritarianism. This would also be child-centered, but also consistent in laying the rules and committed to actually supervising the growth of the child. In my humble opinion, parents probably usually focus on just taking care of the child, but rarely consider how they are helping the child to develop beyond providing them with developmental toys when they are very small. What I mean is that the aim should be to raise a child to become a well-functioning, well-rounded adult. This requires giving them advice and suggestions and exposing them to different ideas and activities so that they become well-informed of the possibilities of life. They should not be pushed to some particular thing, but be shown that they actually can seek and follow their passion. School alone will not be able to do this, even if they do try. A broad view of the whole of life is needed, and one good place to start getting that would be to get started building one's own worldview. The purpose of this project is exactly that, and that is why the first part of the project was Introduction to Philosophy and Critical Thinking, as that is where it should, in my opinion, begin, studying the basics of philosophy and critical thinking. A good time to start that would be at the age of 12 or in the teens. If you were never taught these things, it's better to start later than never. This video brings to an end the section on aspects of development in this course. I hope it has been useful to you. The next and last section of this course will be the stages of life. See you then, and bye for now. If you wish to support my channel, please click thumbs up, subscribe and share my videos. Any comments on the videos would also be welcome.